I had some interesting interactions with Carson shelter over the last couple days, most of which have been unfortunate. Surprise. Yesterday we called on 20 pit bulls. We called on 22 dogs. We ran the numbers of 22 dogs that I photographed over 2 days within the last 3 weeks. I've went 2 separate times and photographed dogs. So we called on 22 dogs that were some of the dogs that were remaining in my album, 20 of which were pit bulls, and then there was like 2 that I photographed that were like collie lab mixes. The only good news out of those 22 are that, guess what, the 2 non-pits, the collies, got adopted, which is great. You know, that's awesome. But the not just bad news, but the horrible news is all 20 pit bulls that I called on were killed. They were killed, all of them. And it seems like Carson has set up such a way of doing their business that not only do they discriminate against pit bulls outright usually, and a lot of the people working inside the shelter, in my opinion, aren't the nicest of persons or individuals, but these temperament tests that they require that pit bulls be put through are really setting the dogs up to fail. I've spoken to volunteers. I've had dogs that I know go through temperament tests and fail from what Carson terms as miserably fail. These are dogs that I know, that I visited with myself personally. Great dogs, friendly, loving dogs, sweet dogs. Carson deems them aggressive. In some situations, they've even deemed dogs very aggressive, that if I were to define that same dog, I would say this dog is a sweetheart. I've met this dog. I've interacted and played with this dog. They, on the other hand, would term it very aggressive. But anyways, these temp tests are basically different stations or different situations that the dog is put in, and some of them are just flat out absurd. They use this fake hand to pat the dog down on its head, on its body, see if there's any reaction. This is like a stick with the fake hand on the end. Then they feed the dog, and they actually reach for the food with this fake hand. A lot of the pits that come in to the shelter are really beat up emotionally and just mentally affected by something that they've been through in their past. So some of them are not overly trusting at first, and when you bring a person in to do these tests that just outright, dogs can feel people's energy. You bring these type of people in to do the tests, people that are shut off emotionally, are cold, desensitized to what goes on because they've seen it so much. They really don't care. They're going through the motions like a robot. This is what they've been trained to do. They're supposed to be professionals at this temp testing, and yet they're the least qualified just based on their human qualities, their compassionate qualities. That's important when talking about a legitimate temp test and it being done the correct way. I believe that's the most important key, and that's where Carson lacks in the most. And the dogs are getting blamed for this. You got kennel workers, you got the feeders, primarily the kennel workers whose job it is to go from kennel to kennel, spray it down, etc., etc. I know just from my own experience with my own 2 dogs, both pit bulls, they both hate water. When they get in trouble, water is like the go-to. They're terrified of it for some reason. I didn't make them that way. They just don't like it. I'm not saying all pit bulls are like that. Some love water, but my 2 don't. They're terrified of it. I go to grab the hose in the yard, they run to the complete opposite ends of the yard and basically camp out. Like, okay, drop the hose. When you drop the hose, I'll come back. That's how my dogs are. And you know, I give my dogs more love than anyone I know. Like, they're like my best friends. And they still are like, oh, you have the hose, I'll go over here. So these kennel workers go in and spray these cages down, and then they're putting notes on these dogs. Like, oh, this dog's fearful. This dog is cowering in the corner. When you say a dog's scared at Carson, that's almost worse than saying it tried to bite me. It's a red mark. It's a death sentence essentially, because these dogs fail temp tests for reasons that can easily be avoided, or there could be some perspective added to these reasons, or they could change some things that they're doing. They don't want to hear it. Carson don't want to hear it. They do it like they've done it, and literally 9 out of 10 pits gets X'd from public adoptions, just outright, just from the temp testing. They'll fail almost all the pits unless it's like a puppy. And even some puppies fail, but at the same time, it's like a puppy. Like, how can a puppy fail a temp test? So those are like the only pits primarily that pass this temp test. Now you'll have every once in a while you'll you know, some will pass, but how does 20 out of 20 pit bulls get euthanized within the last 10 days? And those are just the ones that I photographed. I was only there 2 days out of the last 20 taking pictures. So just imagine the dogs that came in while I wasn't there. I never got the ability to take their photograph. I can't count them. Maybe I didn't even know about them. But the 20 that I did call on, they were all killed.